It's the norm. Pardon. Mind just actually just taking, standing up for just a few moments for the opening prayer.
So just before I do the opening prayer and blessing again, I am Roberta Price, and I'm Snanemo and Cowichan, and the language of my people is called the Halkomelem language. I knew and understood and spoke my language fluently until I was 6 years old. Beyond that, I was tortured to have anything to do with my heritage and my culture. I have spent well over 40 years reclaiming back my identity and reaching out to others to also help them on their healing journey. So I'm very, very honored to do an opening prayer and a blessing for this amazing event today. So in the Coast Salish Longhouse, when we want to say thank you and honor, and I'll have Dave, I'm hiding behind the podium here, so if I can have David show you with our palms up in the air, just like David is showing us. We put our palms up because that means welcome, it means thank you, it means honor. So I'll say a short blessing and a prayer for us today. Haichka, Haichka Osiam Osiam. We call upon you, Creator, to bring your many blessings down upon this special event today. We ask you, Creator, to bring your blessings down upon our minds, our hearts, our bodies, our spirits. So when we think our thoughts, they are good and respectful. When we speak our words, they are good and respectful. We ask, Creator, that you bless the food and drink we put in to nourish our bodies for the strength. To help ourselves, perhaps we may help others. We give you many, many thanks, Creator, and ask for special blessings upon our leader, Dr. Montana, and his team at the BC Center for Excellence in HIV. We give you many, many thanks, Creator, for bringing us together, for sharing and learning and teaching. We ask that you bless all of our works, Creator, and bless us each and keep us safe as we go away from this event today. And we give you many, many thanks, Creator, as we call upon you to bring your blessings down upon the hurting, the hungry, and the homeless, and especially the hurting, Creator. Haichka, Haichka Osiam Osiam. Thank you, everyone. You can sit down now.
So good morning, and thank you very much to the conference organizers for giving us this opportunity to speak. Roberta and I are going to talk about approaches to healing, and healing is a word we seldom use when speaking about HIV care, management, treatment, but we're going to explore just the concept of healing over the next 20 minutes or so. Here are our disclosure slides. So the objectives of this 20-minute talk are to share knowledge regarding the causes of health inequities amongst Indigenous peoples, and to discuss the importance of culture and the role of traditional elders in the care of Indigenous people living with HIV and AIDS. Now, a traditional elder is someone who is recognized in their community as playing a guardian type role. They are all knowledge keepers, and in some cases they are also healers. We're going to do this by actually just looking at a case presentation for a patient in my practice presented last month. And we're going to look at the conceptual framework that we've developed for the Vancouver Indigenous Elders Partnership Program. And this is the program that we started 2 years ago at Vancouver Native Health, where we've been privileged to bring elders such as Roberta into our clinic to do a shared care type of model. So our clinic is located in the downtown Eastside. About 1 in 4 individuals living in that neighborhood self-identify as Indigenous. With respect to HIV, we have historically seen a twofold increase in both the incidence and the prevalence amongst Indigenous injection drug users compared to non-Indigenous drug users. This speaks to something additional happening beyond the poverty, the inadequate housing, the addiction. These are all well controlled for in this neighborhood. To try and understand this, something else that's going on, I think it's useful to bring a slide developed by Charlotte Redding, which uses the analogy of a tree. In this analogy, Aboriginal people are represented at the leaves of a common tree. And to understand the diseases that are manifesting on each of those leaves, it's worthwhile looking to the roots of the tree to understand what's going on, so those being the distal determinants. Now, the roots of this tree go back more than 10,000 years on the Pacific West Coast. But the health has significantly been impacted by the last 150 years of colonial history. In addition to the loss of lands, the policies of the Canadian government, manifested by the Indian Act, the Residential School Act, the Davin Report, and the Potlatch Law, which was a law that made it illegal to practice Indigenous ceremonies or traditions, is a clearly racist policy, and I use this word carefully, but a thinly veiled genocidal attempt to eliminate Aboriginal culture from Canada. This assimilation goal is really just that, the goal of removing Indigenous culture from our nation. The legacy of that has been one of economic insecurity, poverty, racism, and inadequate housing. In this analogy, we look at that as the trunk of the tree. And then we see many of the diseases that we've come to associate with Indigenous peoples. I'm going to bring this back down to an individual, because again, I think it's worth focusing down on the details. Miss CG is a 40-year-old Aboriginal woman. She's HIV positive with a C4 count of 270 and 16%. She has a viral load of 72,000 and is on antiretroviral therapy, although as her high viral load would indicate, she has very variable adherence, and her adherence very much fluctuates with her mental and emotional state. She's actually been a patient of mine for the last 10 years, and I delivered to her HIV diagnosis 7 years ago. And there's only been one sort of 6-month period where she's actually been virologically suppressed since then. She is on a daily medication program, and she does benefit from having an intensive case management team to support her. So she came in early one Thursday morning, banging on the door because she was feeling increasingly suicidal. Sorry, the picture's a little offset there, but to just present her background, I'm going to use the metaphor of an Indigenous medicine wheel. In this metaphor, the black represents the physical. She's HIV positive. She also has chronic pain relating to multiple previous fractures and traumas. She has COPD. She had pulmonary tuberculosis, which was treated, and she spontaneously cleared her hepatitis C infection. She also has been diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which has a significant impact on her on impulsivity. She suffers from recurrent severe bouts of depression. She has chronic anxiety. Often she relates to past histories of sexual trauma, very complicated grief, and she manages much of her mental and emotional turmoil through the use of alcohol and at times heroin and at times cocaine. From a spiritual perspective, and that's represented by the red, beaten down, I think, is a fair description. And she holds a very negative sense of who she is. If Christina, back to this metaphor of a tree, was a tree, you can see how the roots of colonialism in the residential school play out in how she presents to us in the clinic. Her disconnection from lands and traditions, as well as the reality in which she lives in the downtown East Side, an environment typified by violence, inadequate housing, lack of cultural opportunities, untrusted resources, the justice system, the child welfare system, and endemic poverty, helped to create her life situation. Here are her medications. From a social perspective, she immigrated from Winnipeg. She's Cree. She's the youngest of 8 siblings. She achieved a grade 8 education. She has 4 children of her own and 3 grandchildren. She spent 7 years of her adult life incarcerated, and she currently supports herself with a disability income and lives in a single-room occupancy hotel. She is well connected to our clinic through the intensive case management team, the Positive Outlook program, and most recently, over the past 6 months, she's connected to an elder at our clinic, Eugene Harry, who is a man who's very wise in the ways of spirituality and actually is willing to meet people in the parks and on the streets. And this is the first connection that she's had where she can really talk to anyone about what's going on in her emotional and spiritual world. So I'm going to this is somewhat of an embellished family history, if you like. The circles on the left represent the maternal lineage of Christina, who's our index patient here. Going back, her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother, and her great-great-grandmother. This great-great-grandmother was one of 10 children, but she was the only one to survive that generation. And that was typical of about 100 years ago, where diseases such as tuberculosis, smallpox, influenza, and the ramifications of mass migrations resulted in these types of decimation. We can see on our own Pacific coast, in 1825, the census put the population of indigenous people at about 230,000 individuals. In 1925, so 100 years later, it was down to 21,000. So literally a 90% decrease over 100 years, by definition of decimation. But this great-great-grandmother knew her language, knew her culture, knew where she came from, albeit she grew up in an environment of extreme loss and likely chaos. But she went on to marry and have 6 children of her own. These 6 children were initially brought up in their own language, but then were taken into the residential school system. 3 of those individuals died, which was actually the norm statistic at that time for the residential schools. During that time of her education, she was physically punished for speaking her language. She was experienced a certain degree of neglect and other hardships, but she managed to survive and have children of her own, albeit with a fractured sense of her language and a fractured sense of who she is. She goes on to have 5 children. Those 5 children are all taken into residential school, and now these children have even less understanding of who they are from a cultural perspective, a lesser grasp of the language. This great-grandmother experiences sexual as well as physical abuse and self-manages with alcohol upon graduating from residential school. She goes on to have 4 children of her own. Those 4 children are also taken into the residential school. And now you have a mother who was raised by an alcoholic mother who has really lost connection with her language, has inherited a very negative sense of what it means to be an Indigenous person. And she goes on to survive and have 8 children of her own. And as mentioned, 4 of those have already passed on.
Thank you, David. And as I've shared with David in the past, if you put me up on that slide, it demonstrates exactly what happened to many, many thousands and thousands of our family across this country. I wish to share with you that my mother was a mother of 12 children. Only me and my 2 sisters did not go into the Cooper Island Residential School. And we were grabbed by social workers on our way home from school when I was in grade 1. And we were also tortured the directions was to take away our culture. And in my family home growing up, in this non-native home, they took in many, many of our First Nations children because they got double the money as compared to the children of the larger society. So many of those siblings were actually my relatives as well. So in my sisters and my journey, we have buried 8 of our siblings from the residential school and the foster care system. The effects of those at very early with unnecessary deaths through murder, suicide, and manslaughter, and more than just HIV. And I've come to a point of healing now for my dear brother who passed away the day he turned 31 in 1992 of the wasting of the HIV and AIDS. I realize now that it wasn't racism that killed my brother. I realize now, by becoming involved, that those cocktails weren't brought about then. That has brought me to a little point of healing. And my sister passed away on the streets of more than HIV. She had a quarter of her stomach, she had Hep C, she had issues with alcohol, drugs, violence. And I continue to work every single day towards making those changes. while some of the people that I work with might not be able to come to healing. But I work towards making it better for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, because this is where I will see that it will heal. So I give thank you to all the doctors, all the people, all the pharmaceutical people that try to stop HIV, reduce the effects of HIV. And I thank you very kindly for listening.
I should have brought Kleenex. I'm sorry, Roberta.
That's all right. I was thinking I'm not going to cry.
I'll just sort of look back at our patient and just to describe. Thank you, Melinda. So she presented this Thursday morning with increasing suicidal thoughts and impulses that she was worried that she was going to act upon. She thought she was thinking about cutting her throat or maybe hanging herself. And these are very real things that have happened within her family. So these were not gestures to be taken lightly. She had no active plan, but she felt unsafe. The triggers for what put her in this situation is that it was the day of her 12th anniversary of her mother's death. Her older brother, who had been a pillar for her, was actually killed in a car accident 1 month earlier. And she was a victim of a very violent sexual assault 2 weeks prior. So all these things coming together for her. She'd been intoxicated for the past 24 hours and was now in moderate withdrawal. And let me know that morning that she had also relapsed back into heroin use, which she'd been clean of for the past several years. She is adamant. She does not want to see a counselor. She does not want to go to hospital. I had actually certified her against her will at the time when her brother died, and it resulted in about a 3-hour turnaround in the emergency room, and was not at all beneficial to her. But I think that the thing that was notable is that she'd actually come to the clinic for help, which is something in the past that she would not have done. So obviously we have an acute crisis situation that needs to be managed, but to take a step back and think what would be required to promote healing for Mrs. CG. And to think about healing, you can look to our Greek lineage, the word helen, which means to cure or return to wholeness. And just going by the Molby's medical dictionary, it can be seen as the restoration of the integrity of injured tissue. So really looking at, I like the sort of return to wholeness concept, the idea that there's something that we're trying to fix, something that is broken. Elder Eugene Harry sort of shared us, who does have a command of the Halkomelem language, shared with us that the word for healing is halitin, which he describes as being on the right path or getting back on the right path. He talks about being able to talk it out, cry it out, gaining an open mind and heart. So one of really somewhat metaphoric of a journey, trying to get to some place that is better than where you are now. And I think both of these definitions are valuable when looking at Christina. I'm just going to discuss what happened on that day. When she arrived that morning, it was just myself, a physician, along with a clinic nurse who were able to receive her. We were able to medically manage her alcohol withdrawal symptoms, and we managed that throughout the day. She received supportive counseling from the nurse and just had someone to be with. Again, this is someone who just was fearful of being alone at this time. We were able to bring in the services of our mental health team at our clinic. And although she'd always refused to see a psychiatrist, we're fortunate to have a psychiatrist we can consult on, who helped us to craft a safety plan to try and develop for Christina. And it was really the staff of the Positive Outlook program who were able to kind of wrap around Christina, provide her with a meal, talk with her, go through the steps of what she should do when she's feeling suicidal, things that she can do to kind of relax herself, who she should be reaching out to, and when would be the right time to maybe look at hospitalization. Later that afternoon, she was actually brought in to see our elders team. Maybe I'll just let Roberta describe what happened there.
And for many, many times, a lot of the patients actually refuse to come and see the elders as well. And I think because they might have had quite a few, they might be high, and part of that, even though they're in that condition, they feel quite a lot of shame about presenting themselves in front of us elders. So slowly us elders as a team are trying to reach out to those patients to say, we know all about that. We're not high and pure and want everybody around us to be the same. So when Christina came, she did agree to come and see me. And I was very, very pleased to be with her. And then what many times us elders do, and what we realize that many healthcare professionals cannot do, is sit and give that patient time with silence, just honorable silence. So I just sat there and waited for her to start speaking. And then I gently started to speak with her, and then she went on and on and on about how she's just going to quit drinking that day, she's going to quit her drugs, and she's just going to do that. Because I really believe, and a lot of patients do this too, because I really believe they say what they think you want to hear. And I just gently shared with her, you don't have to think about quitting right now. And even if you think about that, perhaps the next time you do pick up that drink, that perhaps you could just drink a little bit less each time. When you do your drugs, perhaps you could do a little bit less. And then it was kind of like I saw her body sigh to think, oh, okay, I don't have to pretend. So then we sit there for another while, and she's still having the effects of how she came in. And after more silence, I offered her up some traditional cultural practices, in which she said, okay, she was ready to do that. So we did that, and I'm not a singer. I will sing with other elders and other cultural teachers, but I don't like sing on my own. But I really, when the women are having such a terrible experience, I really want to honor them and bring their spirits up. And so I asked her permission if I could sing her the Women's Warrior Song. And so I did that. This is how we finished, and she couldn't remain standing. And I said I wanted to sing it for your mother and your family that she shared with all the anniversaries of the losses in her family. And I said, I want to sing it for all of your family members, but for most of all, Christina, I want to sing it for you. I want you to be strong. I want you to get through this day. And many, many times I say to our patients, they make plans, and it's not like 6 months, it's not next year. It's not even a day. It's not even an hour. It's a minute. Just take 1 minute at a time. And she had to sit back down on, we have a comfortable couch in that area, and she sat back down and she cried for a little bit. And then she said, okay, I'm ready to go back down now. And David and I presented to the Positive Outlook program staff, as they're always like renewing of the staff and new people are coming on board. And how I shared with them is what I did and what we did in our communities when it was only us, when we were taking care of our loved ones that were suffering with something. It's the aunties took over. And I really felt when I took Christina downstairs back to the Positive Outlook program, it was one auntie handing a little baby over to another auntie, and she was in their care. And I really, really felt that she felt the support of us elders there. Aichka, thank you.
So this is kind of our framework for what we're trying to do, sort of 3 teams wrapping their arms around a patient. And this works, I think, because we have all members of the team have the shared goal of keeping the patient in the center. I apologize, the picture is a little bit offset, but that's supposed to be a person in the center there. a shared respect amongst the mental health team, the primary care team, and the elders in terms of who we are and what we bring to the table. Being able actually to communicate on the same electronic medical record and have develop informal and formal lines of communication, and a growing shared understanding of what healing means and what we're trying to accomplish through working together. So that's where we're at right now. And to bring it back to our patient, the goal really is to try and reconnect her roots back to her culture and to the land, and to provide her opportunities to practice her culture. And in doing so, we hope that she can actually be spiritually somewhat uplifted and develop a more positive sense of self. And that in turn will spin the wheel and have an impact on her other health conditions. That day, she did feel safe enough to return home. She didn't need to go to the hospital. She followed up with Elder Eugene, and certainly the primary care and the mental health team have continued to work on her suicide prevention and safety plan. She gets ongoing adherence support, and actually her viral load was 56, which is the best it's been in 2 years. So just in closing remarks, that I think it is important to recognize that the disparities we see are the result of a long history of colonialism, what happened with the residential schools, the 60s scoop, and ongoing governmental policies and social determinants. I think you can see that traditional Indigenous and Western medical approaches to healing are complementary. We can both fix and try to get people on the right journey. And I think our clinic is trying to provide one example of how the traditional and modern can be brought together, and recognize that this requires shared respect, shared understanding, communication, and shared goals. And this is very much a work in progress. See Glenn over there, this will be another 8 years, 10 years of our lives to bring this forward. We were privileged to get a CHR grant to try and look at some of the mental health outcomes from this program. We're going to try and look towards HIV and Hep C impact in the future, and we're hoping that we can convert from our 3-year pilot funding to some sort of more secure funding. And I'm glad that there's some ministry people here in the audience today for that. So I just want to say thank you, and Haichko, see you.